It started with a faint signal, weak and full of static, floating through the cold silence of space. At first, no one paid attention. There were always thousands of distress calls moving across the galaxy. Pirates, lost ships, colonies in trouble. But this one was different. It wasn't a simple call for help. It was a cry of pure fear. The voice in the transmission trembled. It wasn't human. It belonged to someone from a faraway world called Threxia, a gentle planet known for art, medicine, and peace. The Threxians were healers, not fighters. They lived in tall glass cities surrounded by soft blue oceans and floating gardens. For hundreds of years they had avoided war and violence, but now everything they built was being destroyed. The message was short and broken, repeating again and again across the stars. This is Threxia. Under attack. Please, anyone, we are dying. They were being invaded by a race known as the Varnic Dominion, a ruthless empire that spread by crushing weaker worlds and taking their resources. The Varnic were known for enslaving entire species and turning once beautiful planets into ash and metal. The Threxians stood no chance. Their defense systems were weak. Their fleets were small and untrained. Within days, the Varnic burned their outer cities and began taking control of the planet's atmosphere. Across nearby systems, governments received the SOS but ignored it. They all knew what helping Threxia would mean, going to war with the Dominion. No one wanted that. So the message kept traveling, bouncing from one communication relay to another, slowly fading into background noise, until it reached the Sol system. A small listening post orbiting Mars detected the signal late one night. The technician on duty almost ignored it, just another static transmission. But when the translation software finished decoding, he froze. The words hit hard. He listened again and again. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a call from people who knew they were about to die. He forwarded the signal directly to Earth Central Command without a second thought. Within minutes, it reached the Terran Defense Network. When the generals and diplomats gathered to discuss it, the room went silent after the message played. Some looked angry, some looked heartbroken. They had all seen suffering before. But something about this call felt personal. Humanity had once been desperate too. They remembered what it was like to cry out for help and be ignored. There was no long debate. No politics. No hesitation. The human representative simply said, "We're going." On that day, Earth made a decision the rest of the galaxy would never forget. Across the planet, massive alerts were sent to every major space fleet and defense hub. Military ships began prepping. Medical and rescue units were mobilized. Even civilian cargo haulers volunteered to join the mission. Engineers rushed to refit transport vessels into carriers. It didn't matter that Threxia was far away or that humans had never met its people. It didn't matter that the Varnac Dominion was feared across the galaxy. All that mattered was that someone asked for help, and humans had heard them. For the next 72 hours, the skies over Earth looked like a storm of fire and light. Launches continued nonstop. From the deserts, oceans, and mountain ranges, fleets of steel rose toward orbit. News channels broadcast live feeds of the preparations. People across the world stayed awake all night, watching the armada form above the planet. No one was forced to go. Every pilot, every medic, every engineer volunteered. Some said they couldn't sleep knowing innocent people were begging for rescue. Others said it was simply what humans did. When someone needed help, they responded. But there was another reason too. One no one said out loud. The galaxy called humans Deathworlders, beings who came from a planet full of storms, volcanoes, and predators. To survive on Earth had shaped them into something stronger than most species could imagine. They were not cruel, but they were relentless. When they fought to win. When they protected, they did it completely. The Threxians didn't know who had heard their call. On their burning world, they were losing hope. Their last remaining cities were filled with refugees. Communication lines were cut. The Varnic soldiers marched through the ruins, taking whatever they wanted. Above them, dark ships patrolled the skies like vultures. In underground shelters, the surviving Threxians huddled together, waiting for the end. Some whispered prayers. Others stared at silent screens, hoping for any reply. None came. The message had been sent days ago and no one answered. Maybe no one ever would. And then one morning, something strange happened. The Varnac patrol ships detected a distortion in the outer orbit, multiple objects entering real space. Their scanners tried to identify them, but the readings made no sense. Dozens of ships, some larger than anything the Varnak had ever seen, appeared out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The human fleet had arrived. At first, the Threxians didn't believe it. Their tracking systems showed a swarm of metallic shapes, thousands of kilometers wide, surrounding their planet like a moving shield. Communication frequencies began to light up with signals they couldn't translate. Deep, steady voices coordinating in perfect calm. Then came the sound that would echo in history, the human fleet's first broadcast. Threxia, this is Earth Command. We received your SOS, hold on. You're not alone anymore. For the Threxians hiding underground, it felt like a miracle. For the Varnak, it was a nightmare. From orbit, the humans scanned the battlefield. Every destroyed city, every burning colony was recorded. They didn't need to ask what happened. The evidence was everywhere. Civilians targeted, hospitals bombed, entire regions turned into craters. Human commanders exchanged no polite words with the invaders. There were no negotiations. The message was simple and final. You attacked unarmed civilians. You enslaved the weak. Surrender now, or we'll stop you ourselves. The Varnak laughed when they heard it. They didn't believe these Deathworlders could stand against them. They were wrong. Back on Earth, families gathered around their screens watching the first live transmissions. They saw the fleet's wings move into position, dark against the stars. They didn't see the humans as conquerors, but as protectors, as proof that even in a cold galaxy compassion still existed, even if it came wrapped in armor and fire. The Threxians didn't know yet what kind of species had come to help them. They only knew that their call had finally been heard. But they would soon learn that humans didn't do small rescues. They didn't send a few ships. They didn't act half-heartedly. When humans responded, they came with everything. They came with fleets that filled the sky. They came with soldiers who carried both weapons and medical kits. They came with engineers ready to rebuild. And they came with a determination that burned brighter than any sun. For humanity, it wasn't just about saving a planet. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. When Earth answered a call for help, they didn't do it softly. They didn't come to talk. They came to end the suffering. As the Threxian sky began to darken with the shadows of the arriving fleet, the first dropships detached, heading toward the surface like shooting stars. Somewhere deep in the ground, a young Threxian looked up at the trembling ceiling and whispered, "Someone heard us." They had no idea yet who these Deathworlders were or what kind of power they carried. But soon they would learn that the humans' mercy was fierce, their resolve unstoppable, and that once Earth decided to protect someone, the universe itself had to step aside. And as the first human ship entered the atmosphere, cutting through clouds of fire, one thing became clear to everyone. This was no ordinary rescue. It was the beginning of something much larger, something the galaxy would never forget. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were not coming with mercy for the ones who caused the pain. The news spread across Earth faster than light. The distress signal from Threxia had reached every home, every city, every spaceport. People couldn't stop watching it on the screens. A trembling alien voice calling for help, pleading as explosions echoed behind the static. No one could forget that sound. At first there was silence. Then something changed. A quiet, heavy determination spread across the planet. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper. That unspoken human instinct that wakes up whenever someone cries out for help. In every Space Command Center, the same decision echoed. Humanity would not stay silent. Within hours, the world turned into a storm of motion. Commanders gave the order to mobilize, and people moved like they had trained their whole lives for this moment. Cargo ships were stripped down and turned into transports. Old patrol crafts were upgraded and armed again. Mechanics worked without sleep, welding and programming through the night. Out in orbit, entire fleets began to form. From the dark side of the moon to the stations near Mars, thousands of lights flickered like fireflies gathering before a storm. The armada was taking shape. Every kind of ship joined. Warships, medical vessels, mining haulers, exploration cruisers. It didn't matter what they were built for. They would go together. Humanity didn't send just soldiers. They sent engineers, doctors, builders, and rescuers. Because when humans decided to help, they helped completely. Back on Earth, news channels showed endless lines of volunteers reporting for duty. Some wore military uniforms, others wore civilian clothes. There were old veterans with steady eyes and young recruits who had never seen space before. None of them hesitated. Each of them knew this mission was more than just a rescue. It was a message about who humans truly were. A broadcast from Terran Command echoed across every major city. The Threxians called for help. We will answer. We will show them that humanity stands with the innocent. We will not turn away. Crowds cheered. Some cried. Others simply stood in silence, proud and determined. Families gathered in their homes watching the sky. Parents explained to their children that far away, another world needed them. Children asked if the humans would win. The parents said softly, "We don't go to win. We go to save." On the launch platforms, the first ships began lifting off. The ground shook. Clouds of smoke and fire filled the air, and thousands of people waved as the great vessels disappeared into the clouds. Some whispered prayers. Others whispered promises that they would bring everyone home. Up in orbit, the fleet stretched out like a constellation reborn. Every hull gleamed silver under the sunlight, marked with the blue and white emblem of Earth. Commanders exchanged words of calm determination over the communication network. No speeches. No boasting. Just quiet focus. They knew what they were heading into. The Varnak Dominion was powerful, known for crushing entire civilizations that stood in their way. But humans had faced impossible odds before. They had learned to adapt, to survive, to fight back even when there seemed to be no hope. That was the spirit that built their world, and now it was about to cross the stars. In the main command ship, rows of screens displayed the fleet's formation. Coordinates were calculated, jump routes plotted. Engineers double-checked every reactor, every shield, every navigation line. It was controlled chaos. Thousands of people moving in perfect rhythm, united by one goal. The final confirmation came through. One by one, ship captains gave the same report. All systems ready. Engines charged. Awaiting jump signal. When the countdown began, the sound echoed through every speaker across the fleet. Hearts pounded. There was no turning back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then, in a flash of light, the fleet vanished from the solar system. Space folded around them, the stars stretching into long white lines as they entered faster than light travel. Inside the ships, crew members floated in silence, staring out the windows. Some thought about their families. Others thought about the people they were going to save. Everyone felt the same thing, the weight of what humanity was about to do. Out there somewhere, a world was dying. And now someone was coming for them. Back on Threxia, the situation was getting worse. The Varnak Dominion had already taken the northern hemisphere. Whole cities had fallen silent. Smoke filled the skies and the oceans turned dark with debris. The Threxian leaders tried to communicate with nearby systems, but no one answered. They were alone, or so they thought. Underground in a hidden command shelter, a group of Threxian survivors kept the communication beacon running. Every few hours, they replayed the same message. "Please, anyone, we need help." Their voices cracked. Their hope was fading. They didn't know that across the galaxy, help was already on the way. Help unlike anything they could imagine. Days passed in space. The human fleet moved like a silent storm, growing stronger with every system it passed. Other species watched from afar. Some admired the courage. Others whispered warnings, calling it madness to challenge the Dominion, but the humans didn't care. To them, it wasn't about power. It was about doing what was right. Inside the command ship, crews were briefed on what they would face. The commanders showed images of the destroyed Threxian cities. The rooms fell silent. People clenched their fists, their jaws tight, not out of hatred, but out of a fierce sense of duty. They couldn't undo what had been done, but they could stop it from happening again. One engineer looked up from his station and said softly, "They asked for help. We heard them. That's enough." Across the fleet, medics prepared emergency stations. Drones were loaded with supplies. Every human there understood one simple truth. They weren't going as conquerors. They were going as protectors. But if anyone stood in their way, they would face the full strength of Earth. The fleet entered the last stage of the journey. Through the observation windows, the stars shifted, revealing a faint blue-green world glowing in the distance. Threxia. It looked peaceful from far away, but as they came closer, the truth became clear. Fires burned across its surface. Giant black ships hovered over its cities. The once bright oceans were streaked with ash. The communication officer turned to the commander. Signal confirmed. This is the source of the SOS. The commander nodded. Then this is where we stop running from who we are. Every ship received the same message from Earth Command. Mission priority: protection of civilians. Engage only hostile forces. Make the galaxy remember why we are called Deathworlders. The crews took a deep breath. Outside, the fleet began to form its attack lines. Massive engines glowed, preparing for atmospheric entry. Drones launched from bays like flocks of steel birds scanning the enemy positions. Within minutes, the entire human armada was locked onto target. And then the first broadcast went out across Threxian channels. Threxia, this is Earth. We received your call. We're here to help. For the Threxians huddled in bunkers, those words felt unreal. They had waited for days expecting silence. And now a new voice had answered, in calm, steady, human. Some of them cried. Others just stared at the radios in disbelief. But the Varnak Dominion also heard that message. And for the first time they felt something they hadn't felt in centuries. Fear. Up above, the human fleet adjusted its formation. The rescue ships held position while the defense units prepared to descend. The humans didn't come quietly and they didn't come small. They had brought enough power to change the balance of the entire region. Down on the planet, the Threxians began to see flashes of light across the sky. At first they thought it was another bombardment. But then the lights multiplied, hundreds of them moving in perfect order, descending like a rain of stars. The Deathworlders had arrived. As the first dropships broke through the clouds, the Threxians looked up through the smoke and saw the silhouettes of strange crafts, engines glowing like suns. It was both terrifying and beautiful. For the first time since the war began, hope returned. The humans didn't speak of revenge. They didn't shout or boast. They came with silence, with focus, with the kind of calm that only those who have faced death and survived can have. In that moment, the universe shifted a little. A peaceful world had called for help, and the children of Earth had answered. Not for gain, not for glory, but because that's what they did. They showed up when no one else would. The Threxians didn't yet understand who these humans were. But soon they would learn that when humanity came to help, they came completely. And when they fought, they didn't fight halfway. Out there in the burning skies of Threxia, the story of Earth's Deathworlders was only just beginning. The sky above Threxia had never looked so strange. It began as a shimmer, a faint distortion spreading across the upper atmosphere. Then came the light. Dozens of flashes blinked one after another, forming a pattern across the heavens. The Threxians hiding below thought it was another attack. Many ducked for cover, trembling as the ground began to rumble. But what came next wasn't destruction. It was the arrival of something immense. Out of the distortion, the first human ships appeared. Not one, not 10, but hundreds. They came in waves, dark shapes outlined by the sunlight. Engines glowing a deep red as they entered orbit. The sky filled with movement. Long metallic silhouettes drifted into position, surrounding the planet like protective giants. To the Threxians on the surface, it looked like the stars themselves had come to life. The Varnak Dominion's forces scrambled in confusion. Their orbital defense platforms sent out warning beacons trying to identify the newcomers. At first, the Dominion commanders thought it was another faction, maybe one of their rivals. But when the scanners identified the origin of the fleet, a chill went through the entire command network. The ships were from Earth. The humans had come. Within minutes, every Varnak vessel above Threxia went on alert. Their captains barked orders, their weapons charging, but the humans didn't open fire, not yet. They simply moved, calm, deliberate, silent. In the human flagship, the command deck was quiet. Officers watched the holographic display of Threxia's orbit. Green dots represented their fleet. Red ones represented the Dominion. There were a lot of red dots. A voice came through the main channel, calm, steady, almost emotionless. All ships maintain position. Do not engage until confirmed. We are not here for conquest. We are here for protection. Every pilot understood what that meant. Humanity didn't start wars, but they finished them if they had to. Below, the Threxians saw strange shapes moving across the clouds. Massive shadows drifted over their broken cities, covering the sunlight. Through the haze, they could see flashes of metallic silver and blue markings, the insignia of Earth. In one ruined capital city, a small group of Threxians climbed onto the roof of a half-destroyed hospital. They watched in silence as the sky filled with the hum of engines. One of them whispered, "Who are they?" Another answered quietly, "The ones who hurt us." High above, human communication channels crackled with reports. Drone scouts had been launched to scan the battlefield. The images that came back made every human aboard fall silent. Entire districts had been wiped out. Hospitals and schools lay in ruins. Civilians huddled in caves and broken basements. The Dominion hadn't just conquered. They had destroyed. There was no more room for hesitation. Human Command sent a single, clear message to the Varnak flagship. "This planet is under Earth's protection. Withdraw immediately or face neutralization." The Varnak didn't respond with words. They fired. A beam of energy shot across the void, hitting one of the smaller human frigates. The ship rocked, shields glowing blue as it absorbed the blast. No one panicked. The pilot steadied his hands and his voice came through the comm, calm and professional. "Shields holding. Returning fire." That was the moment the silence ended. The human armada moved as one. From orbit, bright lines of light cut through the darkness as railguns and kinetic cannons came alive. The Varnak ships tried to dodge, but the humans were faster. Their targeting systems locked with precision born from centuries of survival. Within minutes, the Dominion's outer defense ring was shattered. Down on the planet, the Threxians saw streaks of light slicing through the sky. Not explosions, but trails of burning fire as Varnak ships fell one by one. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't rage. It was controlled power. Every move had purpose. Every shot had meaning. The Varnak fleet, once so confident, began to crumble. Their commanders shouted orders demanding retreat, but it was too late. The humans had surrounded them completely. Then came the next wave. From the underside of the human carriers, smaller crafts detached, dropships, swarms of them, descending like glowing meteors. They cut through the atmosphere, leaving trails of flame behind them. The Threxians below could hear the deep thunder of re-entry. Inside those dropships were the ground teams, soldiers, medics, and engineers, all trained for rescue and recovery under fire. Their faces were calm, focused. They had done this before, maybe not on this scale, but they knew what was at stake. One of the medics checked her supplies and whispered, "Let's bring them home." As the dropships approached the surface, enemy anti-air guns tried to shoot them down. But before the Dominion could get a clear shot, human drones neutralized their positions. Precision strikes took out every defense cannon without touching the nearby civilian zones. The Threxians didn't understand how it was possible. Destruction and protection both happening at once. The first human boots touched the ground near the Threxian capital. The air was thick with smoke, the buildings half destroyed, but they moved quickly, forming protective perimeters around refugee shelters. To the Threxians, the humans looked like giants in armored suits. Their helmets glowed faintly under the dust, and their movements were smooth, disciplined. But what surprised the Threxians most wasn't their weapons, it was their gentleness. One human knelt down and helped an injured Threxian stand. Another handed out water packs from a field kit. Their words were calm, reassuring, even though explosions still echoed in the distance. In orbit, the last Dominion flagship tried to flee. It turned its engines toward deep space, trying to escape the planet's gravity. But the humans didn't let it go. A single Earth destroyer accelerated, its thrusters burning white-hot. Within seconds, it caught up. One precise shot disabled the Varnak's drive core. The ship went dark. Then, for the first time in history, the entire Varnak fleet surrendered. The battle was over. But what followed was something even more powerful. The Threxians emerged from their shelters, blinking at the light. For the first time in weeks, the sky wasn't full of enemy ships. Instead, it was full of human vessels moving slowly, scanning for survivors, delivering aid, restoring power grids. Everywhere they went, the humans worked side by side with the locals. Soldiers became builders. Pilots became rescuers. The same hands that had fired weapons now carried stretchers and medical supplies. On Earth, the broadcast of the operation played live. People stayed awake all night watching every transmission. They saw their fleets not as conquerors but as protectors, strong enough to fight, gentle enough to care. And across the galaxy, the message spread fast. Civilizations that once mocked humanity's compassion now watched in awe. They saw a species that answered a cry for help not with words or promises but with action. Swift, fearless, and complete. The Threxians called them Deathworlders, but after that day, they started using a new word, us Guardians. Still, the humans didn't see themselves that way. To them, they were just doing what felt right. They didn't care about titles or power. They simply couldn't stand the thought of good people being crushed while others turned away. By the end of the day, the fires over Threxia were fading. The humans had taken control of the orbit, dismantled the enemy fleet, and secured the planet. But they didn't celebrate. They didn't shout victory speeches. They simply kept working. One soldier, standing at the edge of a broken plaza, looked at the sunset and said quietly, "This is what we came for, peace." Above him, the sky glowed softly as the last Varnak ship burned upon re-entry. The battle was over, but something far greater had begun, because the galaxy had just witnessed the full strength of humanity, not just in their weapons, but in their hearts. The Threxians would later say that when the humans arrived, they brought both thunder and light. They fought like storms, but when the fighting was done, they were the calm after it. And as the stars settled back into silence, one truth became clear to everyone who saw that day. When the Deathworlders answered an SOS, they didn't come with mercy for the cruel. They came with justice, and then they brought it fast. The air over Threxia still carried the smell of smoke. The sun rose slowly over ruined towers and broken streets, lighting up the faces of people who had spent weeks hiding underground. For the first time in a long while, they could step outside without fear. The battle in the sky was over. The human fleet had won, but the work on the ground was only beginning. Human dropships continued to land in every major city. They came in quiet formations, kicking up dust and debris as their engines cooled. From the open doors, teams stepped out, armored figures carrying scanners, medpacks, and tools. They moved quickly but carefully, checking every collapsed building for survivors. The Threxians watched from a distance at first, unsure what to think. These newcomers looked powerful, almost intimidating with their tall suits and mirrored helmets. Yet their actions were calm and gentle. They spoke softly to the injured, shared food, and gave water to the thirsty. Some even smiled as they worked, trying to ease the fear in alien eyes. One old Threxian stood near a broken transport hub, his arm bandaged. A human medic knelt in front of him, scanning the wound. The medic said something the Threxian couldn't understand, but the tone was kind, reassuring. Then the human placed a small patch over the injury, and the pain slowly faded. The old Threxian stared in disbelief. These warriors had crossed the stars not just to fight, but to heal. All across the planet, scenes like this repeated. Human engineers began restoring power to hospitals. Pilots flew low to drop crates of supplies. Drones searched the ruins for people still trapped. Wherever the humans went, they brought order to chaos. But outside the cities, the fight wasn't finished. The Varnak Dominion still had soldiers hidden in the forests and underground bases. They refused to surrender, hoping to regroup and strike again. Human commanders knew it. They didn't celebrate victory too early. Small human units started sweeping the outskirts. They didn't hunt for revenge. They searched for threats that could harm civilians. The way they moved was unlike anything the Threxians had seen before. Quiet, focused, always protecting first, attacking only when there was no choice. One afternoon, a Threxian child wandered too close to a damaged structure. Before anyone could react, the building began to collapse. A human soldier saw it happen, sprinted forward, and covered the child with his armor as the debris fell. When the dust settled, both were alive. The soldier stood up slowly, handed the crying child to a medic, and went right back to helping others. The Threxians began to understand something important. The humans didn't see themselves as heroes. They didn't ask for thanks. They simply did what needed to be done, no matter the risk. As night fell, the humans set up temporary camps near the largest settlements. Fires burned low, lighting the tired faces of soldiers and locals sitting together. They shared stories in broken words, trading food and laughter. A few humans tried the Threxian fruit rations and pretended to enjoy the strange taste, making everyone around them laugh for the first time in months. Up above, the fleet held its position in orbit, watching for any signs of trouble. From space, the planet looked peaceful again, but in the command centers, humans stayed alert. They knew the Dominion wouldn't forget this defeat. Somewhere out there, more of them were watching. On the third day, scouts discovered a hidden Varnak base carved into a canyon. It was filled with stolen resources and prisoners. The human ground teams moved immediately. Dropships flew low, hugging the terrain, engines silent. When they reached the site, they surrounded it completely. The Varnak soldiers tried to fight. They fired blindly from their bunkers, shouting threats through their translators. The humans answered with precision, not anger, just efficiency. They disarmed the defenses, broke through the walls, and freed the captives without unnecessary damage. When the last Varnak tried to escape in a stolen shuttle, the humans didn't chase with rage. They simply locked on, disabled its engine with a single pulse shot, and took the crew alive. There was no shouting, no cruelty, just discipline. The Threxians who saw it realized something that would later spread through the galaxy. Humans fought hard, but they didn't enjoy fighting. They fought because someone had to stand between danger and the helpless. After the final outpost was cleared, the entire planet exhaled. The sound of weapons fire faded completely. The cities began to breathe again. The humans kept working, clearing rubble, delivering food, and setting up new communication towers so the Threxians could speak with the rest of the galaxy once more. At night, many Threxians climbed to the rooftops just to look at the human ships glowing in the sky like silent guardians. They knew the invaders wouldn't come back, not with those ships watching. In one broadcast, a Threxian leader spoke publicly for the first time since the invasion. His voice trembled, but his message was clear. To the people of Earth, you answered a call no one else would. You fought for strangers. You have given us back our home. We will never forget. That message was transmitted back to Earth, where billions of humans listened in silence. Some smiled. Others wiped their eyes. They had all stayed awake through the long nights, watching live feeds of the rescue, praying for the crews out there. Now, hearing gratitude from across the stars, they felt something deeper than pride. A quiet warmth that reminded them why they had gone in the first place. But not everyone in the galaxy celebrated. In distant systems, the powerful leaders of other empires met in secret, uneasy about what they had seen. To them, the humans were unpredictable, too emotional, too willing to risk everything for those they didn't even know. They whispered among themselves that maybe it would have been better if Earth had ignored the SOS. They called the humans Deathworlders, with fear now, not mockery. Because the name no longer meant savages or monsters. It meant survivors. It meant protectors. It meant that if humans chose to stand with someone, no force in the galaxy could push them away. Back on Threxia, the rebuilding continued. Human engineers taught the locals how to repair their power grids. Doctors shared medical supplies and knowledge freely. Even after the fighting was done, the humans stayed until every hospital was running again. Every family had food, and every child could sleep without hearing sirens. One night, as the fleet prepared to leave orbit, a young Threxian asked one of the human officers, "Why did you come for us? You didn't even know us." The officer smiled softly and said, "Because someone needed help. That's all the reason we need." The Threxian stared at him, unable to find words. That simple answer carried more weight than any speech. When the fleet finally began to ascend, the skies above Threxia filled once more with light. This time it wasn't the light of war, but the calm glow of ships departing after a mission completed. The people stood on the ground, waving to the sky. Some cried, others simply whispered thanks. In the command deck of the leading ship, the crew watched the planet grow smaller on the screen. The commander said quietly, "They're safe now." Another replied, "For now. But if anyone threatens them again, they'll know who to call." The words carried a promise that reached beyond Threxia. Every nearby world heard the story. Every news network repeated the same line. The Deathworlders came, and they didn't come with mercy for those who destroy, only with protection for those who need it. In the following weeks, strange things started happening across the galaxy. Small colonies that had been under constant threat suddenly received offers of protection from nearby human outposts. Pirate attacks dropped sharply. Even the Varnak Dominion, once arrogant and loud, grew quiet. They had learned their lesson. The Threxians began to rebuild faster than anyone thought possible. Human construction drones worked side by side with Threxian engineers. New homes rose where ruins once stood. Schools reopened. Children laughed again. No one could erase the pain of what had happened, but the humans had given them something powerful: hope. Hope that kindness could still exist in a universe full of fear. Hope that even the strongest forces could be defeated by compassion backed with courage. When the last human ship finally disappeared into the stars, the Threxians looked up and whispered their farewell. Goodbye, Deathworlders. Thank you for hearing us. Far away on their journey home, the human crews watched the blue light of Threxia fade behind them. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Every person aboard knew they had been part of something that would echo through history. Not a war, but a rescue. And though the mission was over, humanity had changed forever. They had seen what they were capable of, not just in strength, but in heart. The galaxy had seen it too. From that day onward, whenever a distress call went out across the stars, every empire listened differently. Because somewhere, light years away, there was always the chance that the Deathworlders might hear it again. And if they did, they would answer, not with words, not with promises, but with action. Because that's what humans did. The human fleet stayed in Threxia's orbit long after the war had ended. The fighting was over, but the real work, the rebuilding, had just begun. The cities were broken, power systems were dead, and the people were scared to even sleep. They had survived the invasion, but survival was only the first step. Humans didn't leave after victory. That wasn't their way. When they fought for someone, they also stayed to help them stand again. The first few weeks were hard for everyone. Supplies were running low and communication lines were still damaged. Many Threxians couldn't believe the humans meant to stay. In the past, other species had helped for a short time, taken what they wanted and left. But humans, they built camps beside the ruins and worked shoulder to shoulder with the locals. Each morning, the same scene repeated across the shattered cities. Human engineers and Threxian builders would stand together, planning how to bring power back. Human medics went door to door checking on the sick. Even soldiers, the same ones who had fought fiercely in battle, now carried boxes of food and clean water. One afternoon, a group of human workers were clearing rubble from what used to be a school. The building was completely destroyed, but under the debris they found a small metal bell, the kind used to start the school day. The humans cleaned it carefully and hung it on a new beam they placed in the ground. When the Threxian children saw it, they smiled for the first time since the invasion. It wasn't much, but it meant hope. Everywhere humans went, they left small signs of life returning. They planted gardens near camps, fixed streetlights, and helped farmers repair broken irrigation systems. The Threxians had never seen such determination. The humans worked through storms, dust, and hunger, refusing to rest until things looked better. At night, around the fires, the two species talked. The Threxians told stories about their lost families, their traditions, their history before the war. In return, the humans shared stories about Earth, about oceans, forests, music, and the strange beauty of rain. It was through these talks that they realized how much they had in common. Both had known fear, loss, and rebuilding. Both had learned that survival meant helping one another, but not everyone could accept peace so easily. There were still small pockets of Varnak resistance hiding in the wastelands, trying to disrupt the recovery. They planted traps and attacked supply routes, hoping to scare the humans away. The humans responded quickly but carefully. They didn't use heavy weapons or destroy everything in their path. Instead, they used patience and precision. Drones mapped out enemy movements, and soldiers surrounded the troublemakers quietly, capturing them with minimal force. One Threxian leader asked a human commander why they didn't simply wipe the resistance out. The human looked at him for a long moment and said, "We came here to stop pain, not spread it." That answer spread faster than any rumor. For the first time in Threxian history, the people began to understand the real meaning of strength. Not cruelty, not dominance, but restraint. As days turned into weeks, a friendship began to grow. The Threxians started to help the humans without being asked. They offered tools, maps, and labor. The humans, in turn, taught them how to use new machines and materials. Together, they built temporary homes that would soon become permanent ones. There was one human engineer, known for her calm nature, who worked tirelessly with local builders to restore the main power grid. She spent hours explaining how to stabilize the circuits, showing the Threxians how to build safer structures using the resources they already had. One evening, when the lights finally came on across the main city, the Threxians cheered. Some cried, The humans didn't celebrate loudly. They simply smiled and looked up at the shining buildings. That night, from the mountains you could see the lights of the city glowing again for the first time since the invasion. To the Threxians it was a miracle. To the humans it was just the beginning. Soon after, messages began arriving from other nearby planets. They had heard what humans had done on Threxia. Some were frightened. Others were curious. A few even sent messages of thanks, saying the story had inspired hope across entire systems. The galaxy had always known Earth as a dangerous world, too violent, too unpredictable. But now that same reputation made people feel safer. They started to believe that if humans were on their side, no enemy could touch them. The Threxian Council decided to host a gathering to honor their allies. They invited the human officers who had led the mission. The ceremony was held in the same hall that had once been the Dominion's command post, now rebuilt with clean walls, flowers, and banners of peace. When the humans entered, everyone stood in silence. There were no trumpets, no grand speeches, just quiet respect. The Threxian leader stepped forward and said, "You came to us when no one else would. You fought not for power but for life. For that you have our eternal friendship." The human commander replied with a simple nod. "We didn't do it for thanks," he said. "We did it because that's what humans do when someone cries for help." The room was silent for a long time after that. Those words would later be repeated in countless stories across the stars. As months passed, the first human ships began to leave. Their job was mostly done and other worlds needed them too. But they didn't leave Threxia completely. They left behind teams of volunteers, engineers, teachers, and doctors to help rebuild schools and hospitals. These people became part of Threxian society, living among them as friends and neighbors. One of the last ships to depart carried the commander who had led the mission. Before leaving, he stood on the launch platform and looked over the growing city. Children were playing in the streets again. Shops were reopening. The once broken towers now stood tall with banners that read, "We live." A Threxian child ran up to him and handed him a small wooden carving. A star with a human hand and a Threxian hand joined together. The commander took it carefully, smiled, and said, "We'll come back. You're part of our story now." When the engines roared and the ship lifted off, the people below waved and cheered. Some shouted promises to visit Earth one day. Others simply watched until the light faded into the sky. Back on Earth, when the ships returned, the world listened. They told the story of what they'd seen, the courage of the Threxians, the rebuilding, and the unity that had formed between two species that had once been strangers. The people of Earth were proud, but they didn't boast. They knew that their mission had changed how the galaxy saw them, and maybe even how they saw themselves. For generations, humans had been known for their will to survive, the stubbornness of a species that grew strong on a dangerous planet. But now they were known for something else too, their compassion. The kind that didn't fade after the battle ended. The kind that stayed to rebuild the world they had saved. As the months went by, Threxia's economy recovered. Trade routes reopened. Farmers returned to their fields. Life returned to normal, but with one big difference: humans were now part of that life. Children in Threxian schools studied human history and language. Markets sold Earth fruits and spices. Even their music began to mix with Earth's melodies, creating songs that spoke of bravery, unity, and light. And sometimes, late at night when the stars were clear, people would look up and wonder which one of those shining dots was Earth. They would whisper thanks to the unseen Deathworlders who had come when no one else did. In the Galactic Council, other leaders finally began to change their view of humanity. They still feared their strength, but now they respected their heart. They saw that the same fire that made humans dangerous also made them protectors. On Earth, the fleet that had saved Threxia became known as the Armada of Mercy. Its members were honored not for killing, but for saving lives. Veterans of that mission often said it had changed them more than any battle ever could. One of them once said in an interview, "We didn't just save a planet. We learned who we are." That simple sentence captured everything, because in helping others, humanity had found its truest strength. Not weapons or ships, but empathy. And somewhere in the quiet of space, where signals travel for years before reaching their destination, another distress call was sent out from a distant world. When Earth received it, there was no debate, no hesitation. The same message went through the fleet: Prepare the armada. Someone needs help. And once again the Deathworlders rose, not with vengeance, not with anger, but with determination. Because for humans, mercy wasn't weakness. Mercy was power. Mercy was the reason they fought, the reason they stayed, and the reason the galaxy would never forget them. Time passed. Months turned into years, and the story of Threxia became one of the most told tales in the galaxy. Wherever ships traveled, someone always whispered about the day humans answered an SOS from a dying world, and how they came not as conquerors, but as protectors. The word Deathworlder slowly began to change meaning. Once it had been a warning, a term used to describe the dangerous people from a wild, violent planet. Now it carried respect. When someone said Deathworlder, they didn't picture destruction anymore. They pictured courage, kindness, and unshakable loyalty. On Threxia, the humans who had stayed to help were now part of the planet's daily life. They weren't seen as outsiders anymore. They lived among the people, taught in schools, worked in hospitals, and joined in community gatherings. The children who had once hidden in fear now ran freely through rebuilt streets, laughing at the strange human jokes they had learned. It was a new world, shaped by the cooperation of two species that had nothing in common, except heart. The story could have ended there, with peace and rebuilding, but peace in the galaxy was never simple. Far from Threxia, the Varnak Dominion still licked its wounds. Their pride had been shattered, their armies broken. To them, the defeat wasn't just a loss. It was humiliation. For years, they had ruled through fear, believing themselves unstoppable, and now their power had been crushed by those strange beings from a blue planet. They wanted revenge. The Dominion began to plan in secret. They couldn't attack Earth directly. It was too far, too strong. Instead, they targeted small colonies allied with humans, hoping to send a message. One of those colonies was a small outpost on the edge of explored space, where humans and Threxians worked together to build a trade station. When the Dominion fleet arrived, there was no warning. The outpost barely had defenses. They opened fire, destroying communication towers and setting the colony ablaze. People ran for cover, trying to reach emergency shelters, but one distress beacon managed to send a signal before it was destroyed. Just one message reached Earth. "This is Station Delta 4. We're under attack. Please, help us." The signal cut off halfway through, but that was enough. On Earth, the moment the message was received, the same old instinct awoke. The command centers came alive, screens lighting up with coordinates and status reports. Within hours, the fleet was moving again. News spread quickly. Everyone knew what it meant when the Deathworlders mobilized. The message rippled through human space and beyond. The humans were answering another SOS. On Threxia, when the news reached them, the people didn't panic. They simply nodded. They knew what would happen next. Some even volunteered to go, saying, "We owe them our lives. This time we'll stand beside them." The new armada wasn't made of humans alone. It was a fleet of allies. Humans, Threxians, and others who had once been saved or inspired by them. Ships of different shapes and colors flew together under one symbol, a circle with an open hand in its center. As they approached the attacked colony, they saw smoke rising from the planet below. The Dominion ships were still there, waiting for any survivors to show themselves. They didn't know what was coming. Then suddenly the stars around them lit up. One by one, human ships appeared out of hyperspace, surrounding the Dominion fleet from every side. The void was filled with the hum of engines and the sharp, metallic glint of weapons coming online. The Dominion commander tried to open communications, but no one answered. There was silence, a cold, heavy silence that made every enemy ship freeze. And then the human commander gave a simple order: defend the helpless. The battle that followed wasn't long. It wasn't brutal either. It was precise, surgical. The humans didn't waste a single shot. They disabled weapons, destroyed engines, and protected evacuation routes for civilians. The Threxians fought beside them, their ships moving in perfect sync. In less than an hour, the Dominion fleet was finished. The survivors surrendered without a fight, but what came after the battle was what truly shook the galaxy again. Instead of executing the prisoners or leaving them stranded, the humans treated them. They provided food, water, and medical care to the very soldiers who had attacked innocent people. When questioned why, a human officer said calmly, "Because mercy is not weakness. It's what makes us human." That message, broadcast across the galaxy, hit harder than any weapon ever could. It reached the Varnak homeworld, where the Dominion leaders watched in silence. They had expected revenge. What they saw instead was compassion. They couldn't understand it. How could beings so powerful choose kindness? But deep down they feared it, because they knew they could never control a species like that. On the colony, the survivors were rescued and brought aboard human ships. They were weak, tired, and afraid. But when they looked out the windows and saw the vast armada protecting them, they began to cry, not from fear this time, but from relief. As the fleets returned, messages of gratitude flooded the human networks again. Worlds that had once avoided contact now reached out, offering alliances and friendship. The galaxy was changing. In a few short years, what had begun as a single rescue mission on Threxia had become something far greater, a movement. Humanity had proven that strength and empathy could exist together, and that even in a universe full of fear, compassion could still win. Across space, colonies began forming their own aid networks modeled after the humans. The Threxians started calling them the Promise of Earth. Whenever someone was in danger, ships marked with the Promise's symbol would appear to help. It didn't matter who was calling. It didn't matter what species. They came because that's what they had learned from humans. And though the humans never asked for thanks, the galaxy remembered. Children on distant planets learned about Earth's Deathworlders, not as monsters or warriors, but as the ones who answered every cry for help. Years later, an old Threxian who had survived the First War stood on a rebuilt balcony, looking at the stars. Beside him stood a young human pilot. The old Threxian smiled and said, "When we first met your kind, we were afraid. We thought Deathworlders would bring only fire. We were wrong. You brought light." The pilot looked up and replied softly, "Sometimes light and fire are the same thing. It depends on how you use them." The Threxian nodded. "And you used yours well." That moment summed up everything the galaxy had learned from humanity. Power wasn't about who could destroy more. It was about who could protect more. On Earth, life continued as usual. People went to work, raised families, and dreamed of new worlds to explore. But there was a quiet pride in everyone now. They knew that out there among the stars, their name meant something good. It meant hope. And when the next distress signal came, because there was always another one, humanity didn't hesitate. The message echoed through the control centers just like before. "This is Colony E-17, we're in danger. Please, is anyone out there?" The response came instantly. "Earth copies. We hear you." Within hours, engines roared to life again. Ships lifted from launch pads, cutting through the clouds toward the black sky. Crew members strapped in, faces calm, hearts steady. They didn't know what waited for them. They didn't know if they'd come back. But they went anyway, because that's what humans did. Somewhere out there, another world needed help. And once again, the Deathworlders were coming. Not with mercy for the wicked, but with strength for the weak. Not for glory, not for power, but simply because someone had called. And across the stars, as fleets jumped into hyperspace and vanished into light, one truth echoed louder than any war drum. When humans answer an SOS, they don't bring destruction. They bring justice. They bring hope. They bring humanity. And the galaxy, forever changed, would never forget the day Earth's Deathworlders responded, not with mercy for the cruel, but with love for the innocent.